the first time I read this book, the most challenging thing for me to get my head around was the idea that these may have been part of a later tradition. You know, at the time, I believed I did that thing that they talk about in the book where I harmonized the two, so that it wasn't a Matthew story and a Luke story. They were indeed one story, and we harmonized them, or we blended them, smoothed out all the rough spots, and took away the scenes so that it was just one story. So my first hurdle, the first time I read this book, was wrestling with the fact that there are two stories, that the Matthew story and Luke story are quite different. But the most difficult thing for me was to consider that they may have been part of a later tradition, both the Matthew and the Luke story. Ironically, it was because I took the Bible so seriously, and I was like a Bible-believing person, that the argument that ended up convincing me to change my mind on this subject was actually about the Bible. That the Apostle Paul, who is sort of the central figure for those who consider themselves Bible-believing, doesn't seem concerned about the Christmas story at all. Now, Easter story, death and resurrection, for sure, big deal. But the other thing is that the Gospel of Mark, which is the earliest of the four Gospels in our canon, doesn't have an origin story. So apparently you don't need a Christmas story or an origin story, either Matthew or Luke's, to be true in order for the story to make its point, or for the gospel, the good news of God's love for the whole world, of transformation, of liberation. You don't need a origin story or a nativity scene in order to validate that. And this was perplexing to me. It really was challenging for me to get my head around, because I came from a world, that was deeply embedded in Enlightenment or Western modernity, Enlightenment rationality, where the factuality of something, or the facticity, or the ability to validate it historically, and was like, that was the main goal. That was a big deal. That was validation and verification, So it took me a while, but it was ironically by doing the research myself, reading the Bible, and looking at why the Apostle Paul and the other writers of the epistles, the letters of the New Testament, that John, the Gospel of John, which was our favorite gospel because of the picture it painted of Jesus, the way it talked about Jesus, has this Greek philosophy thing at the beginning, that in the beginning was the Word. It was this cosmic Christ thing. And that Mark, which was the earliest, didn't have it. So it took me a while. And when I finally did come face to face, like I said, by considering the evidence that is in the Bible, it was like it really punched me hard. It really impacted me deeply, because, coming to terms with the fact that there are two stories, that was one thing. But that they may have been part of a later tradition, that was, for me, a bridge too far, as they say. But it was actually by considering the evidence both in the Bible and also, this is important, not in the Bible, that I came to terms with the fact that the perspective that's being put forward in this book we're reading, The First Christmas by Crossan and Borg, that their perspective has some validity, and that I needed to take it seriously. And that was tough for me to come to terms with. But once I did it, it really transformed and opened my eyes to some new possibilities. Let me know how it sits with you.